Hey everyone, welcome to the Power Connection broadcast. My name is Bob Umar. I'm here with Chitra Anand.
Good morning.
Excited to have her here. She's one of my fellow speakers at National Speakers Bureau, and she has incredible expertise in entrepreneurship, innovation, and she's written some a really great book, which we're going to talk about. If you are joining us, just a few logistics. Power Connection broadcast is on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, around 8:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about topics around the things that I care about, which is leadership, the workplace, employee engagement, personal branding, public speaking, and things like that. But I like to bring in some amazing guests to share their expertise because they add more value to myself as well as to the audience. And that's why I'm so glad to have you here. If you are joining again, a few things. Make sure you comment. We want to engage. So, I'm bringing some amazing people like Chitra to talk to you guys, share her expertise. And so I want you all to ask questions. So make sure you're asking questions below and let us know what questions you have for her. Secondly, tell us where you're from. Are you from North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia? Let us know where you're coming in from, because we typically get people from all around the world, which is awesome. And you can also engage people on the feed. Talk to them. You can tag people. If you really like what you're hearing, share us on your page and tag more people for the broadcast. We'll be talking for about 30 minutes and sharing some great insights for you. So hope you can join in. And the topic today is entrepreneurship and how we use entrepreneurship to create more sustainable innovation in organizations and complex companies.
Yes.
I got that right? Okay, great.
Yes.
Good. It's a very complex topic even for me to say, so we'll do our best. So why don't we start off with you, maybe, Chip, sharing a bit about who you are and kind of what you do and a bit about your story.
Sure. So I've been born and raised in Toronto. I have spent most of my career in the tech space, so in big, complex organizations. So I've spent, 3 or 4 years at a company called OpenText, which is out in Waterloo. I spent 10 years at TELUS, and then 4 years at Microsoft. So what was interesting about my time during these organizations is I always found myself at the crossroads of really transformational projects and change within these large organizations. And I found myself operating like an entrepreneur inside these big companies. And so it sort of created a bit of a paradox for me, operating and thinking and wanting to push boundaries and be super creative, take risks, because these organizations during the time that I was there were not conducive to those sort of constructs in which an entrepreneur would operate within these large organizations.
And that's why I left.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't fit in.
But what was interesting about my time there is I always found ways to mobilize some of my ideas, whether it was finding similar kinds of people, because entrepreneurs cannot work in isolation within these organizations because they're highly matrixed and because they're highly complex. You need different people from different cross-functional teams in order to make these ideas happen. And I always managed to find them. So then I started to develop a bit of a track record, if you will, of, this is the person that can mobilize ideas. This is the person that can operate very quickly, which was attractive at the time because, as you know, these big companies, by very definition, are large, complex, they're lethargic, they're slow. Right. But when you can find people that can operate at a very quick pace, that's very magical. Because right now the world is in this sort of nanosecond culture. So I fell in love and I started to do this research around this concept called entrepreneurship. And I wanted to make a contribution in the business world. So over the past 7 years, I've been doing doctoral research at a university in the UK called Bradford University, which I will be defending very soon in the next couple of months around entrepreneurship. I've just written a book called The Greenhouse Approach, which came out about 6 months ago, which is all around entrepreneurship, pulling it on some of the core concepts of my research, my personal experiences, and also some key interviews with some executives who have sort of validated or, shared their ideas around this whole idea of entrepreneurship and its positioning around sustainable innovation in the market.
And I've heard the term entrepreneurship for a long time.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's been a slow adoption by companies. So why are they so slow to adopt this idea?
Well, I think because they are, by definition on how they're structured. They're highly governed, they're highly structured. Things do happen slowly because of the constructs in which they operate. So it is hard to adopt these ideas. And, I think probably one of the biggest challenges is being able to identify the talent that lives within your organization. So entrepreneurs are not made by definition. These people live inside these organizations. So part of my contribution in my research is being able to identify the attributes and characteristics of these individuals that actually live inside these organizations, so they can, number one, be identified, and number two, be supported in the right ways in order to sort of unleash their creative thinking that's quite needed.
And is that different than identifying high potential corporate employees? I mean, you identify high potential corporate employees who can get up to that vice president level. And then on the second hand, you're identifying people who have a high level of entrepreneurship ability.
I think they're very different because I'm not, identifying high potential employees has a big, wide definition to that. But what I'm focusing on at a very, very specific level are the actual characteristics, attributes, behaviors that will lead to the outcomes of on entrepreneurial behaviors that will be beneficial from a value add perspective to the organization.
And are entrepreneurial people more of a risk if they're not invested in that they'll leave, like I did, because I just didn't feel like I fit in and I wasn't supported?
Are they ever? Well, I think
you know what I mean. Like,
part of it is, it's sort of twofold. Number one, being able to identify these people, and in order for entrepreneurship to really live within these organizations, they absolutely have to be supported.
Right.
So if they're not, it's kind of like, if you don't support these individuals, there is risk, there is flight risk, absolutely. But these people are, I believe, your magic weapon inside organizations, from a product development perspective, really innovating new ways of conducting business. If it's talent acquisitions, these are the people that are going to start to create these new streams of work that will all be around value creation.
Wow. Okay. I love the way you're very concise, which is really good, which is fantastic. Now we have a few people joining us. Kristen Ward says, "Good morning, Bobby and Chitra. Happy Monday." Thank you for that. Sajid Kumar says, "Oh, he's already got questions here." Look at this. All right, Sajid Kumar is always good with the questions. He's a regular.
Okay.
Most large companies are not open to entrepreneurship. How do you get around this? Okay.
Well,
sorry, before you do that,
yes.
I think that we should probably define entrepreneurship for people, just
sure.
so because I kind of forget. I have an idea, but I can't forget. So let's just clarify that first.
At a very basic level, entrepreneurship is somebody who takes an entrepreneurial approach from within a large organization to really drive sort of new value creation, whether it's creative thinking, new business models, new ways of conducting business.
And I can actually tell a quick story about that, which is when I was working at De Havilland as an engineer, and I wasn't creative at all, and I had the entrepreneurial spirit. And so while I was working there, outside the company, I started a musical theater company. I started producing and directing musicals. I wanted to do something kind of exciting, and then I finally took that energy and within the organization decided to put together a De Havilland social activities program. And I laid out the entire plan of wanting people to be more bonded as a community, because I'm all about connection and community. So I put this idea of how to create community within the organization and get people involved in really having fun social activities. I pitched it to the senior HR there, and it just went dead. Like they met with me, they thought it was a great idea, nothing ever happened. And so that's an example of where this big company with 1,000 employees wasn't able to introduce something small that I wanted to do, and so I eventually left. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that happens a lot more now.
Yeah.
And sort of the challenge that presents, which what I talk about in my talks is, because we're in this gig economy and free economy now, people don't need to be employed by big conglomerates anymore. So really what's going to happen is, competitive advantage and sustainable innovation is really going to be through your talent and the intellectual capital that you produce within these organizations, and your people are the ones and the brain power that are going to do that. And these are the entrepreneurs that live inside these organizations. So you have to give them a platform where they can start to ideate and create, but then also deploy their ideas.
Wow. Okay. So we're talking to Chitra Anand about entrepreneurship and how it leads to sustainable innovation in large companies. And again, if you have questions or you want to join the conversations, please comment, share your thoughts. Also, if you like what you hear, you can always like, clap, heart, light bulb, and smiley face on the feed to make it more engaging. Let's start with the first question we have here, which is, Sajid Kumar says, most large companies are not open to entrepreneurship. How do you get around this?
Well, my answer to that is the following: is when you want to start sort of the entrepreneurial process, there has to be some sort of guiding principles that can help guide an organization and people through the process. So what my advice is that I give back to people that ask me that is, you need to if you have ideas or ways to enhance the business, each of your ideas have to be rooted and underpinned by the goals of the organization. So you have to look at it from a macro level and then take the ideas that you have and start to build out your plans and ideas from there. Everything that you present and everything that you do should be rooted again in research and data, so that when you're presenting ideas and solutions, they're actually coming from a place of facts and data. And when you can do that, then nobody can really argue an idea or a concept when you've done the research, when you've done your homework, when you start to think about how do we mobilize, and you think about all the cross-functional teams that need to be involved. Like, you've thought through all of the different potential hurdles and roadblocks, and you've presented it in a way that's cohesive, that can be transcended throughout the organization.
That's interesting. And so, the concept of entrepreneurship, you focus on large, complex companies.
Yes.
How is it relevant to, let's say, smaller companies, small and medium enterprises? Because, even in those, there are people who are entrepreneurial and others that are not. So how does that work with those smaller organizations?
Well, my area of research has been around large, complex organizations. However, a lot of the ideas that I have, researched or distilled through, all of the data that I've sifted through, absolutely can be applied to the medium enterprise and even in small organizations. So, for example, and one of the chapters in my book is talking about first principles thinking. Okay. And so there's this whole argument right now on, where we need to operate more efficiently and effectively. We need to make better use of our time. But I would argue that the biggest, the most value that you can bring to the table is really around how we think. And our thinking capabilities is where we're going to really receive maximum sort of output. So I have a whole chapter on first principles thinking. And first principles thinking is really rooted in the idea of problem solving, at a very, very core level. So when we're in the boardroom or when we're trying to solve problems within the organization, we have to question all of our assumptions that we have about that particular problem. And we sort of have to peel back the layers and get to the root of the data. And when you can do that, that's when you start to think at a very efficient level, which will drive the right outcomes.
Wow, that's exciting and very interesting. Another comment from Krishnamurti, who says, how critical is autonomy and responsibility when you take up entrepreneurship to create more value?
Yeah, absolutely. Like autonomy and, sorry, what's the other word?
Autonomy and responsibility.
Of course. Yes. So, people need to be independent thinkers. That's, one of the things that I also talk about is you have to give people time, space, and capacity to, think critically, to do their research, to problem solve, and that comes with a high level of autonomy.
I find that this topic to me is, I find it challenging because I think a lot of companies, similar to personal branding too, because I'm a big personal branding guy. I go to companies to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I find is that even though I'm trying to pitch this idea and talk about this, part of my job is to educate them on things.
Yes.
How much are you, with your work, trying to educate companies on understanding this better?
Well, that's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it.
Yeah, I know,
it is
right?
an education. I think it's part education, but it's part realization.
Right.
Because what typically happens is when I do these keynotes, or even when I start to talk to people, they have these light bulb moments where they realize that they've been operating like an entrepreneur, and now they can put a word and a word to it, and then they can start to identify some of the behaviors. And then what happens is when they have employees or team members that are starting to showcase some of these core attributes and behaviors, they now know exactly what to do to best support them.
And how did you know you wanted to get into this topic and be because you used to work in corporate, and you decided to leave and then basically focus on this topic, not only as doing a PhD, but also just being this thing that you wanted to do. Where did this passion for this topic come from?
Well, it's because I grew up in large complex organizations for 20 years and I was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I had a very different approach in how I did my work and even the thinking behind it. So it was like, I wanted to do something more to give back, to help sort of, move the organizations forward in a meaningful way.
So when you worked in corporate, were there times though, like any sort of stories where it was working, or you were able to use your entrepreneurial skills?
Oh, absolutely, and everything that I did. So it was almost a daily way of operating. So if work hit my desk, over that 10 years at TELUS, it was constantly, first principles thinking, and I didn't realize that I was actually applying that thinking in the projects or the initiatives that I was doing until I actually started to do the research on the whole topic of entrepreneurship.
Right. So if you are an entrepreneur in the workplace, and what are some of the constraints that work will put on you that stifle your entrepreneurship?
Well, that's a good question. Environment dictates behavior.
Yeah.
So, you can have pockets of entrepreneurship within an organization, and you can take a highly talented person and put them in an environment, even within one particular organization, where they'll flourish and grow because they're being supported. But then you can take that same person and put them on a team or another environment where they're not supported and flourished, and their ideas will dwindle. So it's really about environmental characteristics. It's about leadership. It's about social cohesion amongst the team. How are you operating in order to support and cultivate these people from a talent perspective, but also from an environmental perspective?
And this, of course, requires a major culture shift, right?
Yes.
So then, how do we address the culture shift to, because that takes time.
Yes.
So how do we best address the culture issue?
Yeah, in parts of my books and even through my research, I talk about unlearning some learned behaviors.
Unlearning.
Got it. Unlearning learned behaviors.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a whole chapter around guiding principles and rules, for example. So one of the things that we know about entrepreneurs is that they don't stop at organizational boundaries. They find other ways to navigate the organization to make things happen.
Right.
And I can relate to that because I've
Me
done
too.
that. I've done
Me
that
too.
throughout my entire career,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you have too. It's where you don't take no for an answer, and then you find different ways to, because you're so.
I got in trouble though.
Of course.
I got in trouble.
Well,
okay.
We ask for forgiveness after the
Yeah.
fact. After you do the great work, after the big win. And so the whole idea is rules versus guiding principles. And so these organizations are so bound by rules. And when you think about the word rules, you think about action and consequence. You've got children and I've got children. And if, we're so socially conditioned to say, if you break this rule, you'll be reprimanded. If you break this rule, this privilege will be taken away from you. So we take those ideas into the work world with us. And so there's a fear of breaking rules. And if you think about any great innovation, the rules were bended and broken. It's very uncommon to find that you didn't have to push these boundaries. So what I'm suggesting from a more sustainable perspective is that these organizations relabel rules to more guiding principles. Because when you think about guiding principles, they're malleable, they're flexible, they're outcome-based thinking. And so in order to achieve that, you can start to, institutionalize these work packets, which you can pull and push to make things happen.
And it's funny, I'll share a story that when I was in the workplace with brand marketing, I told my boss's boss, my director, that I could deliver this thing within a certain time, or 6 weeks. And my boss was like, can you do it? I'm like, yes, I could do it. And then show us. And so we proved her that we could do it. But I was creative. I had to go around corners and make things happen, and I was very creative about it. And even though I was successful, right, she was upset that I went around these creative corners because I didn't go. I pushed it through. I'm like, well, what do you want? Do you want people to push through and hustle for you, or do you want? Like, what do you want? And she was disappointed that I, through a regular process, wasn't able to achieve the result I had to go through around the process. I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm hustling to get it done for you because I said I would. Yeah. And you're saying that you don't like that? Okay, like it sent a really confusing message to me, which is another reason why I wanted to leave.
That's understandable.
Tell us a bit about your book.
Yeah.
The title, what it means, and then also what you talk about in the book.
Yeah. So the Greenhouse Approach, which is available on Amazon, is really a book around, the thesis really is if organizations and the market are being disrupted, then we have to rethink how we operate from an organizational perspective. And what if we can emulate a greenhouse from within these organizations with the right ingredients, with the right mindset, with the right ideas, with the right support, so that people and ideas and organizations can flourish. So the book is sort of written in two parts, is, sort of what is entrepreneurship? How do we, rethink organizations? And then the second part is really the how-to, if you will. That's my book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to cultivating entrepreneurship within ourselves, is this something that we are born with, or that we can train, or a mix of both? And how do you feel about that?
Well, entrepreneurship is really about a way of thinking. Okay. I think that some of it is embedded within us, absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's creative thinking, whether it's starting to question our assumptions on what we think about certain things and how we approach work, whether it's how we work, it's how we do research and bring the data and the insights into our work lives. So it's really about, it's within us, but then it's learning new skills that's going to be required for the new world of work.
And I guess the other thing I'm curious about is, for this book, you talked about design principles.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about that and explain what that means?
Design principles?
Was it design principles or
guiding principles?
Guiding principles.
Guiding principles.
Yes, please talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, if you have an organization that have particular rules, rules are typically black and white. If broken, then reprimand. Right. And what I'm suggesting is guiding principles are a little bit more flexible and malleable. So what could be interesting is for leaders to have conversations with your team members to say, this is sort of what's set in stone. These are what are more malleable and flexible, which we can push and pull in order to achieve what we want to. So it's really about outcomes and what we want to achieve. So when you do that, it creates more of a path and a roadway to help us realize what it is that we need to.
Okay, we're talking with Chitra Anand about entrepreneurship and how it leads to better innovation and innovation cultures within complex organizations. So if you have questions, please ask away. Let us know where you're from and comment below. One question I had, though, is like the higher up you go in organizations, now you're the vice president or the CEO.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me those people are less likely to be entrepreneurial.
I would say that's a generalization.
Okay, look at me, I'm generalizing. Shame on me.
No,
but that's why you're right. That's my perception.
We can't make that generalization.
Okay.
I mean, it really depends on the individual. It really depends on the leader, and it really depends on their thinking. I've had some phenomenal leaders that have been entrepreneurial and they didn't even know it. And it was until I started to do the research where I can start to say they showcased and displayed entrepreneurial behaviors. But then there were some that were not at all. Okay. So I don't think it's that black and white. It really depends on sort of the thinking and the behaviors that these people showcase.
Fair enough. Now, since you're doing a PhD and you wrote a book, you're probably a geek on this stuff. So do you have any interesting data that talks about the importance of entrepreneurship as it applies to like workplace results or productivity or impact, things like that? Any interesting data on that?
Quantitative data?
Yeah. I'm just thinking like that.
Yeah. Well, my research is qualitative.
Oh, sorry.
So
okay,
it's not a quantitative study.
I see. Okay.
So they're very different. What my research really talks about is more of the themes, ideas, and sort of what has emerged from the deep research. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
but I'm sure there are. Well, from the research that I've done, there's very limited data on. Most entrepreneurial projects have to have certain sort of criteria in place in order for them to be successful. Right. And some of them have percentage associated to what were the success rates, etc. Based on certain criteria.
Okay. And people are still commenting like Julio says police. I don't know, police DB. I don't know what that says, but that's okay. It's like in Spanish. Chris Moore says I'm with you on that, Chitra. So like people are definitely hearing what you're saying, which is great. Is there any question you want to ask the audience to answer in our feed, and like something you're curious about them?
I would love to know if people have can associate or sort of self-identify, if you will, as an entrepreneur.
Right.
If you do, what are some of the traits and attributes that you think that you are, whether it's, whether you're risk takers, whether you sort of challenge the constructs within the organizations that you work in. Have you had any success stories around entrepreneurial initiatives or projects where you've taken something from ideation to execution through the very complex organizations that you may be at. That'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. So if you have some stories on entrepreneurship and you've actually been there and and demonstrated those traits, comment below. Let us know, because I'd love to hear that from you. I would say that for me personally, I've always been like that. I've been the type of person that never really fit in the corporate space. I was always coming with creative ideas. I was always innovating things. But most times it was falling on deaf ears, or I felt constrained by the constructs of whether I was an engineer, when I was in engineering, or when I was in brand marketing. I didn't fit in, and it was really hard for me. Like, it's hard for me to fit in, and I can't imagine myself, ever working for a large organization. But I know some of my friends who they work for organizations that are really good with entrepreneurship and really good with innovation. So they seem to be quite happy with it. But I think it's hard to find.
I think it is hard to find. I mean, I think that that's probably what typically happens. And I mean, I've been there where you don't quite fit in, that you have unique skills and attributes. You want to do more. You want to create a sense of purpose. You want to see, one of the talks I did, I had a gentleman come up to me, and he had been within an organization for about 6 years and didn't accomplish anything during the 6 years and felt really bad about it. So I think when you start to apply these principles and this thinking, you get a sense of purpose, you get a sense of movement in the work that you do, you get a sense of output, you have a sense of contribution, and then you start to develop a community around like-minded thinkers, that have different skills, but you have a common purpose, which is what everybody wants to be a part of, which will then ultimately help organizations from a value creation perspective.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to be feel part of something. I think that if you create a community of entrepreneurs who feel like they're empowered and they're supportive, that's when it starts to make a big difference.
Yes.
Let's see. Rumsha says, I've been through 10 different organizations in full-time and contract roles. I'm scared to say that I've been big on entrepreneurship. That's interesting.
I'm scared to say that.
Scared to say that. Wow. I'm curious why. Rumsha, why are you scared to say that? And why do you think people fear saying that?
I think people are fearful of that because of the culture that they might be operating in.
Right.
Because when you do talk about entrepreneurship, you're talking about individuals who aren't afraid to take risks. They're not afraid to take calculated risks where they might fail.
Right.
And people are afraid to fail within organizations because there could be a price associated with that failure. But I'm all about these being thoughtful in how you fail. So if you have a very provocative idea that will help the organization achieve a goal, there should always be some sort of contingent planning where you can pivot successfully in order to redirect, and sort of that whole thinking process has to be happening from the very get-go, so that you have a clear sort of path and vision on where you're going and where you potentially could go, so everything is really, really well thought out.
And Rumsha said that she's worried about they get reprimanded for it.
Okay, well, that's very common.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I know that is unfortunate, and so one of the things I always say in a situation is you either try to change the situation, and you talk to people and try to make things happen, or you accept the situation as it is, and you let it go, or you exit the situation and try to find another job or another manager that's going to support you in what you need to do. I think it's a common thing. You mentioned a failure, right? So I love that topic.
Yeah.
Failure, resiliency, when I had a failed project, so I'll share another quick story, which was I had a failed project in one of my jobs, and I had an anxiety attack. When my director called me in his office to talk about it, and I just shut down and wouldn't talk. It was awkward for 20 minutes. And I think failure is a really powerful thing. And what can organizations do better about encouraging or supporting failure in the workplace?
Yeah, well, it's quite a fascinating topic because failure is a very negative word. Yeah. And so one of the things that I've started to do just from an individual perspective is reflecting on failure. So, if you think about any great innovation or any great breakthrough, failure led to, and we know this, failure has always led to greatness. I mean, even when I started my PhD, I was failing miserably through the first 2 years because it's learning, and you don't know. You're learning how to write a dissertation. You're learning how to do research, but the failure is very difficult. And so what you need to do is stop and extract the learning in order to be stronger and to be better. But again, I go back to, when we're children, and there's such a negative connotation with failing, but there's learning in the failure.
Right.
One of the great things that we used to do at TELUS is we always used to do a win-loss review on projects, or even pitches, for example.
Right.
And what it forced us to do, if we won or failed, it forced us to reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, and what we need to change in order to do better next time. And so I think that when you start to adopt those types of ways of being and ways of thinking and those practices, then the organization starts to become more comfortable with failure.
That's awesome. And Rumsha says, most projects I finished, I had trouble getting credit for. Not to sound sympathy seeking, but it just gets polarized by most organizational structures.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. So, I'm here with Chitra Anand talking about entrepreneurship and creating sustainable innovation in complex organizations. And again, why don't you tell us people where? She's an author, she's a speaker. So we both are speakers for National Speakers Bureau. So you're looking to hire a speaker to talk about innovation and sustainable innovation and culture and entrepreneurship. Chitra's a great person to chat with. She's amazing. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me on my personal website, so chitraanand.com. You can find me on National Speakers Bureau if you just Google me. I've also written many articles for the Globe and Mail, so if you just Google that, I'm there. And my book is on Amazon called The Greenhouse Approach, but you can also find me there.
Yeah, and if you have any other future questions, if you're watching the replay, right, you have questions, by all means, just comment below, tag us, and we'd be happy to answer your questions, and definitely reach out to her. I think that'd be great. But for the rest of you, we'll kind of close it off unless anyone has any last minute questions, but I'll be mindful of time. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll be back I think I have another interview coming up on Friday for the Power Connection channel. We're here Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings at 8:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch the replay over and over again if you want. You can share on your page. You can comment. You can talk to people here. We're happy to see your questions. And thank you, Chitra, for your time.
Thank
really
you
appreciate
so much.
it. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everyone, take care. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you very, very soon.